We hear all the time about amazing discoveries, way out in space or in the deepest parts of the ocean. But sometimes the most interesting mysteries are right here on Earth, right under our noses.
Absolutely.
Today we're going to take a deep dive into a real biological puzzle, a head-scratcher, you could say. And it all starts in the Philippines with a little critter that's proven very hard to find, the Leyte Chorus Frog.
A fascinating story, for sure. It really shows how science and all the advances in technology can solve mysteries that have been around for decades. It's a testament to persistence.
Totally. This frog, scientists call it Calula conjuncta sticuli, was first spotted way back in 1944, and they officially described it in 1954. Even back then, scientists noticed something a bit odd about its toe discs. But here's the real kicker. Even though researchers have been looking for it, only 7 individual frogs have ever been found. Worldwide. Just 7.
Wow.
That's crazy, right? I mean, that kind of rarity makes you wonder, is it a subspecies, a really fragile species on the verge of disappearing, or something else entirely?
Yeah, when you find so few specimens, it makes it really hard to use those traditional ways of classifying things. I mean, with so little to go on, it's really tough to say for sure where it fits in with other amphibians.
Exactly. So our mission today is to figure out what this mysterious frog really is. And we can finally do that thanks to some awesome new genomic research. It turns out that our little Leyte Chorus frog has a pretty unexpected origin story. It involves 2 other frog species, ones you might be familiar with. There's Calula c. meridionalis, a frog that loves hanging out in trees and bushes. And then there's Calula picta, which prefers to stay on the ground.
Right.
All right, so let's start from the beginning. What made this Leyte Chorus frog such a big deal in the biology world in the first place?
Well, like you said, the first thing was its looks. It just looked different. The researchers who found those few frogs, they noticed it didn't really look like any other frog species in that area. That's what led them to initially classify it as a subspecies. But the fact that it stayed so rare, so incredibly hard to find, well, that made scientists question that classification.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Usually subspecies have much bigger populations,
Yeah.
So that's where the question started. Was it a distinct species that was just super endangered? Or maybe even extinct, and we just didn't know it yet? It was tough to figure out because it didn't have clear physical similarities to other species. It was a real puzzle.
A puzzle that lasted for, what, almost a whole century?
Right.
Okay, so now let's talk about something really important here. The landscape of the Philippines has changed drastically. We're talking about deforestation on a massive scale. How did that loss of forest maybe play a role in this amphibian mystery?
That's a key part of the story. Sadly, the Philippines has lost a lot of its forest cover because of logging and how land is being used. That deforestation has really fragmented natural habitats. And here's the important part for our frog. It increased the areas where Calula c. meridionalis and Calula picta started overlapping. Their ranges started to bump up against each other.
Normally, these 2 species wouldn't interact much at all. They're like totally different environments. One lives in trees and bushes, the other on the ground. They even breed in different places. But as forests were cleared, these open areas popped up, and it basically pushed these 2 species closer together than they would ever be naturally.
So it's like deforestation set the stage for some unexpected biological mixing.
Exactly.
Which leads us to the really exciting part, the genomic breakthrough. So when we talk about genomic research, what were scientists actually doing with the DNA to solve this mystery?
Well, imagine they were reading the genetic code of these frogs, like comparing the instruction manuals for different species to see where the instructions were the same and where they were different. Researchers were really lucky to get DNA samples from those few museum specimens. Some of those samples went all the way back to that first collection in 1944. There were also some from another find in 1996. Those older samples were super valuable because they gave us a genetic snapshot from a different time. Using these advanced tools, things like bioinformatics, which is basically using computers and algorithms to analyze all that DNA data scientists could compare the Leyte Chorus frog's DNA to the DNA of those 2 suspected parent species, K. c. meridionalis and K. picta. The goal was to finally figure out how it was related to them and to other frog species.
And I hear the results were pretty surprising. What did that genetic analysis tell us about the Leyte Chorus frog?
It was a real twist. The analysis showed that the Leyte Chorus frog is what we call an F1 hybrid.
Okay.
It's a first-generation offspring. Like, it came directly from a Calula c. meridionalis parent and a Calula picta parent. So it has a very specific genetic makeup. Exactly half of its genetic material comes from each of those species.
So it's like a 50-50 mix.
Exactly. It wasn't a unique subspecies hiding all along. It was a hybrid the whole time, which, makes us rethink what a species really is, right? Here's this distinct organism, but it didn't evolve gradually over time. It came about from a more immediate mix of existing genes. Makes you think about how fluid those biological categories can be, especially when environments are changing so quickly.
It's a huge shift in our understanding, and it explains why those early researchers described it as kind of in between, not quite one thing or the other. So, how did this hybrid origin actually show up in the frog's physical features? We talked about those weird toe discs before.
Oh, that's a great point. Remember, cul-de-sac meridionalis, the tree-dwelling parent, has these big, expanded toe pads. They help it grip branches and leaves. Callula picta, the ground dweller, has much smaller toe pads. It doesn't need them for climbing. Well, the Leyte Chorus frog, being a first-gen hybrid, has toe pads that are right in the middle. They're bigger than the ground frogs, but not as big as the tree frogs. That physical trait is a direct result of its hybrid ancestry. It's like a visual clue to its mixed genes.
It's literally a frog that shows its mixed parentage, both in its genes and what it looks like.
Yeah.
But if it's a hybrid, why is it so rare? Why haven't we seen more of these hybrid frogs?
That's another key part of this mystery, and explains why we don't see more of them. The research suggests that the Leyte Chorus frog is probably sterile. When you have a first-gen hybrid like this, from two species that don't normally breed together, their genes often clash. It prevents them from reproducing.
Like mixing and matching from two different puzzle sets.
Yeah, exactly. The pieces just don't fit together right. And that causes problems with reproduction at the genetic level. That sterility means the Leyte Chorus frog can be born, but it can't pass on its genes. Not to other Leyte Chorus frogs, if they ever even met, and not to either parent species.
So it's kind of stuck.
In a way, yeah. It's a bit of an evolutionary dead end. And that's why it can't form stable populations.
That's a really clear explanation. It makes sense why it's so rare. It's a biological one-off. This whole story also highlights something super important, the importance of natural history museums. Those specimens, some from almost 100 years ago, held the key to solving this mystery.
You're so right. Natural history museums are like libraries of biodiversity. The way they carefully preserve those specimens with information about where and when they were found, it's crucial for research. We wouldn't have been able to do this genomic analysis without those original Leyte Chorus frogs, the ones at the National Museum of the Philippines, the Texas Memorial Museum, and the University of Texas at Austin.
It's amazing to think those museum specimens are like time capsules. They let us go back and analyze things with new technology decades after they were first discovered.
They really are.
It makes you realize that those things in museum drawers, they're not just dusty old relics. They could hold the answers to big biological questions that we haven't even thought of yet. Speaking of answers, it sounds like there was a moment when it all clicked for the researchers, that aha moment when the pieces of the puzzle came together.
Oh, absolutely. The researchers mentioned how, years ago, some really observant biologists in the field noticed something. They saw K.C. meridionalis and K. picta interacting in places where the habitat was changing a lot. That was a clue, but back then they didn't have the tools to prove a hybrid origin.
I see.
It was the combination of those field observations showing how the environment was changing and modern genomics that finally gave us the answer. They revealed the Leyte Chorus frog's true identity as this rare, non-reproducing hybrid. It's such a cool example of how different types of scientific work can come together and solve a mystery.
So to sum it up, the Leyte Chorus frog isn't some elusive species hiding out there. It's a rare hybrid, a biological anomaly, and its very existence is tied to human impact on the environment. Specifically, it's because of deforestation that forced two normally separate species to mix and very rarely breed.
Exactly. And that's the real aha moment here. Habitat destruction doesn't just hurt existing species. It can lead to these new, unusual biological outcomes. It blurs the lines of what we even consider a species.
Wow, that's a lot to think about. Human actions can have such unexpected consequences for the environment. They can lead to these complex interactions between species and even change how we define a species. It makes you wonder what other hybrid species or weird biological things are out there just waiting to be discovered, especially as habitats keep changing all over the world. It's a pretty mind-blowing and maybe even a little scary thought.
I agree. It really makes you think.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us as we explored the mystery of the Leyte Chorus frog. It's a reminder that there's still so much to discover and understand about the natural world, especially as it changes all around us.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure being here.
Until next time.
Until next time.